Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our interfaith panel discussion hosted by the Spiritual Life Center here at the University of Lynchburg, where we're going to be discussing spiritual wellness. We've got a panel that will be joining us here in a second, and it's our hope to just have a short conversation on how do we find spiritual wellness in our lives and through our particular spiritual practice. So we have a panel here of good friends that are going to join us and to talk through exactly that. What is our spiritual wellness practices? How is it that we discover spiritual wellness? So I'm going to invite each of us to kind of introduce ourselves and share a little bit about our practice, and then I'll ask our first question. So my name is Nathan Albert. I'm the Associate Chaplain in the Spiritual Life Center. For context, I come from a Christian, more progressive Christian tradition. So that kind of frames the spiritual practices that I'll share a little bit later. So we'll go down. Claire, would you like to share as next?
Yeah, so my name is Claire King. I am Buddhist. I am a sophomore here at Lynchburg and an international relations major.
That's great. And next I'll welcome Ryan.
I am Ryan Pulaski. I am a freshman here at the University of Lynchburg. I'm a Christian. I was raised in a Methodist church, but I've bounced all around to all different denominations. I'm a English and theater major with several minors.
Brilliant. And finally, Jer.
Hi, I'm Jer. My pronouns are he, him. I'm the interfaith chaplain here. I would say I'm probably spiritual, but not religious, with interest in being a universalist and humanist. But I've bounced around too, so I understand, Ryan.
So our first question just kind of frames, what does your spiritual practice look like? So are there, concrete things that you do every day or every week? And what does that look like in a nutshell? So Claire and Ryan, we'll start with the both of you.
Yeah, I can go. So my spiritual practice, I meditate, I'd say once a week. There's sometimes in the morning I'll meditate or in the evening. But I think what I tend to do is more of a walking meditation. And I feel like I practice my faith constantly, and I don't have to sit down and make it a priority. I just have it always in the back of my mind. So just in the way that I treat other people or the way that I view the world, or say I'm walking through the Dell and making sure that I'm completely present in that moment. It's just a way for me to always be well, and to find love in my faith is to constantly have it a part of my life.
That's great. Ryan.
For me, it's pretty traditional Christian practices. I attempt to go to church every Sunday, but I am also of the belief that where I read the Bible as much as I can. I've fully read through it several times, but I believe that it's not something that can be understood with one reading. So I am consistently finding new things and unpacking new aspects of the scriptures. And I feel that constantly just keeps me in touch with God and allows me to practice my faith consistently as well. So
that's great. Jared, do you want to share a little bit of what your spiritual practice looks like?
Sure. Well, meditation, as Claire knows from the Buddhist community, is very important to me. I'm also inspired by the Quaker style of worship, sitting in silence, in a time when we are always on during the pandemic in a virtual realm. I think that silence is important. I love Buddhist chants. I also find spiritual experiences in poetry. I love Joy Harjo and the late Irene McKinney. But also from, sort of the humanist inspiration in my life, I think service is also a part of spirituality as well as advocacy.
That's great. Jer and I are kindred spirits we both love meditation. We both love silence. And I echo that as well. I think a lot of my own spiritual practice revolves around meditation and in the typical sense, but then also a type of centering prayer. So that in some ways in the Christian tradition, that's often like sitting in silence for 10, 20, 30 minutes, just to listen to maybe what your mind is saying to you, what you think the divine is saying to you, what deep things are going on inside your heart and soul. So both of those have been really profound for me. Similar to Ryan, reading of ancient texts and scriptures, not only from the Christian tradition, but different spiritual writers. I love reading Catholic monks. I love reading Zen Buddhists. There's a lot of those just richness in that I think are regular practices. Meditation is daily. I try to do that daily. But then there's other practices like, for me, like being a vegan and plant-based diet. That's actually become kind of a spiritual practice. So that's been interesting to discover. And so I find also kind of retreats or meditation centers. For a while, I used to go to a monastery outside of Chicago, and I didn't really hang out with monks, but I like watched them from a distance, but it was such a profound experience to sit in some of these like beautiful chapels, cathedrals, but then also to kind of be in a cloister away from people just in silence has been pretty profound for me. So that's some of my day in, day out practices.
Okay, well, how about the second question? How does your spiritual practice contribute to your overall wellness? Why don't we start with Ryan?
As I mentioned, the biggest part for my spiritual practice is, of course, going to church. And I think that aside from the fact that it is a lifting experience going to church every Sunday, I think a very important part of it is the community that church brings. I'm a very firm believer of worship in a group. I think it brings everybody in the group closer to God and closer to each other. It is a very, very lifting experience just to be around those who share faith and who are, in essence, there for you and there for each other, which is what I think a large part of church is. And I think that gives me a very communal feeling that is very uplifting and helps me feel centered and well. So
that's great.
Thank you for sharing. Claire, how about you?
So I would say service to other people is a very big part of my practice. And I would consider myself very involved in the Lynchburg community and serving my community. And it has brought me so much peace. And that's one thing that I love so much about Buddhism is it's truly a philosophy of kindness. And it seeks to serve all living beings.
Yep.
And I have found so much like wellness and peace and joy just from giving my time to other people and knowing that just me smiling at somebody or doing a very small kind gesture could create this positive karma that's a ripple effect in our whole community. And it just brings me a lot of joy.
That's great.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you. Nathan?
For me, I feel like it's given me a centeredness or a groundedness that like I notice on days when I don't meditate or when I don't, I often do like a regular prayer rhythm throughout the day, right? So pausing in the morning, at lunch, kind of in the evening. And I notice on days when I don't do those things, sometimes how overwhelmed or stressed my day feels. So it gives me a sense of centeredness and groundedness. I think, I think it similar to what others have said, the seeing how kindness translates to others, right? Like when I'm centered and kind of just focused, that translates in my relationships with my sons or my wife or my coworkers. And similar to what Ryan said, how church can be an uplifting experience and being in community can really just kind of just like awaken your heart. I think those are all benefits of how it helps with wellness. I think I went through a season of just like crazy stress and anxiety and an overwhelmed season. And looking back at that time, I realized now how much those practices helped me to get through and how those actually helped me handle crazy seasons in life. And so that's kind of how it overall wellness. So it's not only personal, but it affects, similar to what Claire said, it affects other people, right? When you're well, that kind of pours out to others in your life. So Jared, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, definitely for me, meditation, if I miss meditating on a particular day, I feel it. I don't sleep as well, actually. So I feel like meditation is a way for me to unwind. And sometimes meditation, I should say, for me is about emptying the mind, but other times it's not. It's about, being influenced by Quakers, listening for the inside voice to sort of guide me. But I also think that this sort of humanist idea of taking care of other humans really sustained me during the pandemic. Really this idea of we are all connected and how can we look out for each other regardless of any type of label that we may have put upon ourselves, really sticking together. And that's an important part of my life now. And I attribute that to the humanist community here, to the amazing chaplains I work with, and to all of the great groups that I work with. This belief that we have to be there for one another and take care of one another. That is spirituality in a new way for me, because I came from this idea of meditation and sort of working on spirituality on my own. And now I have all of these amazing communities that, as Claire said, we can come together and really support one another and change not only our days and our members' days, but the whole community's day, right?
Yeah, that's great. Well, one thing we wanted to ask specifically Claire and Ryan was what advice do you have for fellow students, right? As we are all doing virtual hybrid model schools, we're still living through a pandemic. We're almost done with the semester, which also means there's more work to do. But what is your advice right now for your fellow students, how they can improve their spiritual wellness, overall wellness? What would be kind of your word of encouragement or advice to them?
I would honestly say having conversations like this. I think when you learn to value so many different perspectives, especially in the political climate we're with and everybody being so disconnected with the pandemic, I think acceptance is such an important part of wellness, and respecting other perspectives and understanding the things that move other people. Because if I understand somebody else's religion, I understand their values and how they view the world, and therefore how I should interact with them. And that not only brings you peace, but them peace as well. So I think having that respect and acceptance and looking out for other people. Like I work with a humanist on campus, and we go and we collect food and take it to the food pantry on campus. And I've learned so much about her. She's learned so much about me for a religion that I didn't even know about beforehand. Yeah. And we've created this connection that's really beautiful. And I think doing things like that is really important, not only for your own wellness, but for other people as well.
That's great. Ryan, what about you?
Yeah, I totally agree with Claire on this. It's finding that community and expanding it to include not only those within your practice, but those outside of it, so that you can make both yourself and others well through through your beliefs and through your practices, and above all else, going out of your way and finding people to talk to. These kinds of discussions are ones that do need to be had. And I think they are uplifting and bring more of a light to who we are as humans. So
that's great. Jared, I'm curious to hear your thoughts as, working in the Wilmer Center, the Spiritual Life Center, being a professor. What would you say to students right now during this pandemic? We're almost at the end of the semester.
Well, goodness gracious, what great advice from both Claire and Ryan. They're both just outstanding. I would say be compassionate with yourself. We often have compassion for other people, but not ourselves. So be compassionate with yourself, be patient, try different spiritual practices. Part of overall wellness is spiritual wellness. So, work at your spiritual wellness, just like you have to work at physical wellness, you have to work at spiritual wellness. And try to find spirituality in activities that you might not usually think are spiritual. Like I mentioned poetry, which is very spiritual, but there's also painting and sculpting. I love the idea of going for walks and walking meditation, which Claire alluded to. I think that's great. You can work on physical wellness, emotional wellness, spiritual wellness, all three in one. But I would say, try and don't give up. Just like it takes us a little time to learn to ride a bike, it might take us time to learn meditation. It might take time to learn what kind of prayer suits you. But be open, be compassionate with yourself, be patient, but really work at it, just like you have to work at any other type of wellness.
That's great. Yeah, I love all of these, all this conversation. I echo your Claire and Ryan, your passion to. This is important conversation, right? Like the more we understand one another, the more we have a greater ability to work together, to live together, to honor one another. I sometimes think that these types of conversations are looking at a diamond and looking at all the facets, right? Like when you move the diamond around, you can see a different facet. And sometimes we get so focused on our one facet that we think no other facet of the diamond is as bright as ours, because this is my tradition. And when we turn that around, we realize like, oh, there's so much that's gleaming and beautiful. And Claire, like you said, when you're learning about humanism, you realize, oh my goodness, I'm learning not only about your tradition, but actually that's impacting my own tradition, like my own understanding. So a humanist can make you a better Buddhist. And yet as a Buddhist, you can make a Christian a better Christian. And as a Christian, we can make a spiritual but not religious a better spiritual but not religious inner. I don't know. But there is something really good about us doing this work together. So I want to thank you for your time. I know this is a brief conversation, but that's what our kind of these interfaith panels have been, just short, quick conversations on how we can bring together people and have discussions on wellness. We've got one coming up next week. If you're watching, next week we'll have one actually on deconstruction. So what does it look like when your faith doesn't seem to be working the way it once worked? What do you do? How do you get through that? So we'll have a conversation with some students next week about that. But Claire and Ryan, thank you for participating. Jer, as always, thanks for your work in the Spiritual Life Center and on campus. For those of you who are watching, you can share this on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. We'll hopefully get it up on Instagram soon. But from all of us in the Spiritual Life Center, we wish you well. We wish you compassion for yourself and for others. And you're close. We will make it to the end of the semester. So enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Nathan, so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you all.
Thank you.